how does a venture capitalist think about investing in AI?
So if you think about construction, manufacturing, automotive, defense and national security, energy, healthcare, typically these were complex sectors, complex technologies, complex supply chains, value chains, customer relationships, where typically people had to be deep experts in those space.
But, says longtime VC Bilal Zuberi, things are about to change pretty radically.
Now with the introduction of AI, there are people who are outside of those sectors who are now able to say, hey, my knowledge and understanding of software and AI is now applicable to this sector. I can use software to start designing proteins and molecules that would act as the next generation drugs.
Same thing for designing buildings, creating better batteries, and on. And Zuberi says the potential for return on investment is considerable.
And if the outcome is going to be new industries, new economy, new jobs, great efficiency, national security, economic advantage globally, those things have real value associated with that. And I think that's what we should be doing.
I'm Kara Miller. That's all coming up on MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab's Alliances Podcast. But before we get on with the show, a note about a podcast from our friends at Harvard Business Review. It's their flagship show, HBR IdeaCast. Every week, editor-at-large Adi Ignatius and executive editor Allison Beard talk to the world's leading business researchers, experts, and practitioners to bring you new, actionable ideas and inspiration. Search for HBR IdeaCast wherever you get your podcasts. And on our website, we've got 2 courses from CSAIL that are coming up. One is Deploying AI, which looks at when, where, and how to leverage AI for strategic impact and ROI. The other course is Cybersecurity for Technical Leaders. If you enter in the discount code CSAIL15, you will get 15% off. You'll find info on both courses at csail.mit.edu/podcast. That's csail.mit.edu/podcast. Bilal Zuberi is the founder and managing partner of the venture capital firm Red Glass. And he says the AI shift reminds him of the internet revolution.
That created many, many, many trillions of dollars of economic advantage all over the world. I mean, added to the GDP here and everywhere else. The primary function that led to that was the cost of communication going to zero.
Before Red Glass, Zuberi worked at Lux and General Catalyst, and he has a PhD in physical chemistry from MIT.
Similarly, if you think about AI, the primary thing that is happening is that in some ways the cost of intelligence is asymptotically going to zero. How long it takes to get there, TBD, but it is enabling us to break free from the shackles of, how many intelligent, smart, educated people we have access to in any particular industry.
More on that later and what happens to those people, to those experts. But for investors and for entrepreneurs and for incumbent businesses, the market opportunity is here.
So when you think of it that way, massive industries in the U.S. that are about 10 to 15, trillion dollars of our GDP. That's in manufacturing, in healthcare, in construction, in automotive. These things have been constrained by human resources.
Right.
And that is getting unlocked with AI. So industries that were previously, not accessible for rapid innovation are now becoming accessible to younger people who are saying, I want to innovate in these fields.
And that innovation, as Zuberi points out, could be a multi-trillion-dollar proposition. But his focus is not apps, it's not search engines, it's deep tech, which has attracted a lot of media attention recently. So how does he define deep tech?
Deep tech to me means breakthroughs in fundamental technologies and fundamental sciences. So while we can, do certain things in software and in application layer, there's certain stepwise improvements that only come when you solve something that's more underlying. It could be in the physical phenomena, a new kind of a chip or new kind of a compute paradigm or a biology change that you've understood or manipulated, or a systems level improvement that was pretty complex for all the pieces to come together. So that's deep tech. And we need to be pushing those frontiers, because if you really think about it, every 5 to 10 years, something new dramatically different happens in fundamental technologies that truly pushes the world forward. AI is no different. It's not just the software and algorithms. It was the availability of the compute. I mean, this year we're celebrating 70 years of the word artificial intelligence that showed up in a paper with Claude Shannon and others. People were talking in 1950s about some of the concepts that we talk about now.
Right.
But what changed was that the compute became available. And it wasn't just about money. It was that, GPUs, which is a certain type of a chip architecture that was built for something else, but somebody started using it, about 10 years ago, that showed that, oh my God, this architecture could be very well placed to be able to provide compute for AI. So I think that's one way to think about this. The second thing that should not be lost is also the idea of, using technology to solve important problems. Like, technology is not just there to make some money. Mm-hmm. Technology is also a fundamental way to solve some of our biggest problems. So when I think of the biggest challenges facing humanity, you think about climate change, you think about energy availability, food shortages, water availability, war, famine, disease, all of these things. These are massive challenges. When you think about solving those problems, we can't, cut costs and reduce waste and solve those problems. We have to have fundamental breakthroughs in technology that enable us to directly address those challenges and solve those problems. And that I think of as deep tech investing.
Are the areas where you feel like you're finding the most compelling investments? Is it in those areas, in the climate change, the energy availability, the water availability, or is it other things? Where do you think the most interesting stuff is right now?
So I would argue the vast majority of investors right now are focused on using AI to transform what we called SaaS applications of the last 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. SaaS meaning software as a service. Right. Think about all the cloud-based applications, whether it's your Salesforces of the world or Dropboxes or Netflixes or Facebooks. So they're transforming all of those and coming up with a new search engine that's now AI-powered search engine, or some kind of a customer relationship management tool that's AI-powered tool. So that's where they're focused, because the markets are well understood, and they're saying, hey, if we were to do this now in 2025, would we do it differently? And if yes, let's go build it.
Right.
I'm thinking of it very differently. I'm thinking of markets and applications and sectors that were previously, not tractable for people who are not experts in that space already. So if you think about construction, manufacturing, automotive, defense and national security, energy, healthcare, typically these were complex sectors, complex technologies, complex supply chains, value chains, customer relationships, where typically people had to be deep experts in those space and in fundamental sciences. Like, there were mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, material scientists, doctors, MD, PhDs, and all who would feel that they were qualified enough to tackle these challenges. And thankfully they did. And that was my investing over the last 10, 15 years. But now with the introduction of AI, there are people who are outside of those sectors who are now able to say, hey, my knowledge and understanding of software and AI is now applicable to this sector. I can use software to start designing proteins and molecules that would act as the next generation drugs. Right? I can start using software to do simulations and build civic structures. Like, I can do engineering of architecture that can be AI defined. I can optimize materials in batteries, so I can create better or longer lasting batteries or higher efficiency batteries. And that to me is really interesting, because it's unlocking sectors that were previously relatively closed off, and it's creating opportunities for startups to transform businesses in trillions of dollars worth of our GDP, and fewer investors are focused on it. So, I think if I'm successful, I'll be able to build a great franchise doing this.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue in some ways that Elon Musk is a little bit of like with Tesla, there was like an outsider. It's hard to deal. It's hard to get into that business when you're not an incumbent, right? When you're not Ford and GM and you've been doing this forever and ever. And there was kind of like from the software angle, like, let's build a car. Do you feel like that? Or
I 100%. I think that Elon Musk is a great example of somebody who came out of, payments and financial services companies. Yeah. And then because of the passion that he had, it was like, let's go do that. Now, in his case, he had a decent command of technology, but more importantly, he felt like he had access to capital that he could deploy. I mean, initially his own capital, and then he could raise capital to do that. Today, we see many, many people who are not from these sectors, who are not automotive guys, but wanted to get into automotive. Like so this is what happens. You're a young kid growing up in Midwest. You grow up with photos of Einstein in your room. You love cars or jets, and you want to be a soldier one day or pilot one day. And you graduate in high school with great degrees, and you could be the next Nobel laureate in medicine, right? But then you go to college and then you say, hey, all the high-paying jobs are the software engineers that are going to work for Facebook or Uber.
Right.
So what do? You end up taking computer science as your major. And 2 years into it, you're looking for an internship. You get a job at Google. You go there for an internship, and then you finish college, and then you end up working at some software startup, or you go join one of these big tech companies, right? Your dream of building jets or new automotive, batteries or going to Mars is like left on the sidelines because you're now a software engineer working at, some AI SDR company, right? A sales company. And typically, you'd be out of the running for effectively the rest of your life unless you became a billionaire and said, I want to change the world. You'd be doing software for the rest of your life. But today what's happening is that if you've done all of this above that I described and worked for 5 years at OpenAI or DeepMind or Google or Uber or Airbnb, and you've made some money in your life, and you're like, but what I really cared for was to build a fighter jet that moved faster, or I want to build solar battery systems that are, renewable, or, my uncle died in a hospital and he wasn't taken care of, so I want to solve this particular disease or this particular modality in healthcare. Now you can access that because now you can say my knowledge of software and how to build these fast-moving software companies is actually applicable to these industries. And I don't have to go back and do a PhD in material science to be able to work in the battery systems. I can now use my software to actually build a company that creates real value in that sector. That is something that is new and really good for our society, I think, because the talents are being deployed where we need them most.
So let me challenge you on one piece of this, and you can, tell me where I'm wrong here. My sense, and this is anecdotal, I've read some stuff, talked to some people, but among software engineers, for example, is like the helpfulness of AI as a tool. My sense is it still feels a little bit debatable. Like there are people who feel like, yes, very helpful for writing code. I think other people feel like, yeah, it's okay, but it makes plenty of mistakes. And software is a place, it has no physics to it, right? Like you don't have to worry about it, dropping the cup on the floor kind of thing. It doesn't have to have a sense of the real world. And I don't know. I wonder if you hear that kind of feedback and what you make of it.
Yeah, but I mean, look, everything that we've done when we start off, it's kludgy and early. As somebody who did a PhD in chemistry, the early instrumentation that we used was like terrible. It didn't always work. We would get bad results and we would have to look at it and go back at it and do the experiments many times to make sure that it was doing the right thing. Early, if you remember, access to the internet was spotty at best. We would sit there with AOL CDs and hope that the connection wouldn't drop halfway through a download. And we're like, this is useless. We can't do this. How could I ever have a conversation with anybody? And guess what you and I are doing now? We're talking over the internet. Right? And so sure, it makes mistakes. But the analyst I hire who just did an undergrad paying $80,000 a year at Boston College is going to make terrible mistakes. But that's just a part of learning. And they're going to get better. And if they don't get better, they get fired. And if they get better, they become better than me. And I think that's just the AI will go through the same thing. It's making mistakes. It's more useful in certain things than others. But that's just, the best analyst that I can hire, I can say the same thing about it.
You mentioned a whole bunch of areas, construction, manufacturing, so on, that you think about when you think about investing in deep tech. Can you pick like maybe one or two examples of technology or an area that you've seen where you can say like specifically, this is how this thing that you're kind of used to, this is how it might change or is changing?
I mean, the most obvious one that comes to mind is the self-driving cars.
Mm-hmm.
Like when my parents come to California, they're absolutely astounded that they go into San Francisco and, every third Uber taxi equivalent is a car without a driver.
Right, right.
It's just crazy. It's mind-boggling to people around the world. But to people who live in San Francisco, they don't even think twice about it anymore. I mean, I'm sure it's available now in a few other cities as well. But the idea of a self-driving car is very, very real. And you can go do it now commercially. You can just pay just like a taxi fare. It is no different than 13, 14 years ago, I was in Boston and Uber just launched in Boston that day. There was a special event and they said you could download the app and use Uber for free to go to their launch event. And I was invited to it and I downloaded the app and I was incredible that a black car showed up at my doorstep and took me there. And I said, oh my God. Now, it cost more money than a typical taxi, but now it costs much less than a typical taxi.
Right.
There's the same thing with an autonomous car. It's happening real time, that it's driving you to places where you take that driver away. Yeah, we have to deal with the social implications of taking a job away, but that's a different problem. The fact that you can have a car that is less likely to get into accidents, that is less likely to have assaults done and all the other shenanigans that some of these, situations. I mean, this is great. My wife would definitely trust a autonomous car with my kids driving alone than some random driver driving my kids from point A to point B. So I think that's absolutely, happening right now. But similarly, you can think of AI-enabled healthcare. Many of us, including myself, we don't consult with our physician for minor things that come up here and there because the process is frankly, a pain in the ass to do.
Right.
Even the teleconference, all they've done is, instead of going in person, you sit and wait for the doctor to show up while, you're hanging on a Zoom call for an hour. And they always run an hour late. I don't know why. But imagine that was not true, that I could consult a healthcare system all the time, right? Like if I could just share information with it, not only automatically all my vitals that are, data getting collected and shared, but, I'm not feeling well today for this reason. And it asked me, what did you eat today? And over time, you start building a compendium and say, every time you have a big meal with a lot of gluten, it causes problems. Maybe we should go do this test, right? You may have a gluten intolerance. You shouldn't have to discover that in your 40s when you really start having pain, right? Or managing, chronic ailments. Right? Most people just get used to the idea that our sugar levels will go up and down and whatever will manage that. However, but no, it could be done in real time so that you're never out of the bands in which you should be operating. AI could be doing this for us, providing us, we ask AI search engines all the time of where is this shop located? What time is it open? Is this thing in stock or not? AI is being used, at least by people like me, all the time for that. Why can't the same thing be done for healthcare? And I think there are people who are building companies to do exactly that. That there should be no reason why, especially if you're sitting in a developing country and it's not easy access to doctors, but you're trying to figure out that is it okay for my father who's 80-year-old to feel this pain in his left side? No, that's not okay. But, they're not going to do anything about it until he really complained about the pain. When the reality is that he should be able to really ask, this is happening, what do we do? And it should be able to tell him what he should be doing, if anything.
I wonder how you see the academia to industry pipeline factoring in, if it does. We've seen a bunch of AI-related spinouts come out of the CSAIL at MIT recently. I think about liquid AI. But obviously, there's so much money being put into startup companies. I wonder if, to what degree academia factors in here maybe versus other technological cycles.
So there are various ways to think about this. I'm a huge fan of academia. I'm a product of academia. I spent a lot of years in academia and I would have done more. I think academia is very good at a few things. They're very good at pushing the frontiers, meaning your incentive reward system is to not do what somebody else has already done.
Right.
But to be at the edges of that and asking the questions of what if it doesn't work, and then seeing what comes next. And so we need to constantly be pushing the frontiers in all kinds of technology areas. And we should be asking questions that are not only related to the efficiency and efficacy of these systems, but also the implications and the ethics and all kinds of stuff that are relevant. Academia is also very good at, in some ways, the pedagogical training of learning to learn. Right? The most important thing we can do at our schools and universities, and the best universities do that, is it doesn't make you just memorize facts about a particular discipline. It is helping you understand how to learn that discipline and how to ask the next set of questions and then do the empirical testing that's required to come up with the hypothesis and then collect the data and prove it one way or the other. Academia is very good at that, and I think that's happening in AI as well. So are these models good? Do they have a fundamental flaw? Like we talked a little bit about hallucinations or the models giving, wrong information. Is that a fundamental flaw? Or is there ways around reinforcement learning or otherwise that could solve part of that problem?
Right.
Is there a way to preserve privacy while you're working with these models? Or are we going to live in a world where everything will be known by everybody because every model needs to have all the data about you? So there's a lot of very interesting technical and intellectual questions that academia is answering. What academia is not good at is fast iteration. Their incentive systems are not built for that. And industry is very good at that. And I think in this field, because some of the changes are happening so fast, that people are finding that, a whole set more problems can be solved much faster outside of academia than in academia. So in some ways, academia is getting relegated to the more outsider problems, the more longer term issues, which are very important in the long term, but in the short term feel like, is it really having an impact? Are they really getting rewarded for it? And then we have this awkward situation where, how do we fund academia to be able to do such long-term research?
Well, and also it sounds, I also think of like spin-outs in some ways, the way to get your research to iterate on your research is to move it out of academia, like maybe have the academics advise it, but to push it out.
Yeah, I think academics that have found either the internal support for that or the incentive systems to do that do it all the time. There are faculty members at Stanford and MIT who are spinning out companies on an annual basis.
For sure.
Because they almost have, part of their time dedicated to building companies. In some ways, we're going through a phase where we haven't figured out how to have companies participate in research and spin out process with academia, the companies that are less than 10 years old. If you go back to IBMs and Fords and General Electrics of the world, because they saw themselves as, hey, we've existed for 100 years and we're going to exist for the next 100 years, or at least they believe that to be the case, they felt like they have to put time and effort and money into longer term research and longer term solutions. They saw themselves as sort of a part of the fabric of what the society will look like decades out into the future. The way academia sees that, university will exist for the next 50 years. So I should be thinking 50 years out what the science and research needs to look like. The companies that have come into existence in the last 10, 15 years, they're not seeing themselves that way. They're too focused on just existing today, right? The famous meme that went around during COVID with this Indian guru is basically saying, just don't die. Right? If you just don't die, everything will be fine. So that's the principle on which a lot of startups are operating, and because of that, they don't have, at least as yet, a longer term horizon. Right? And that is why it has been harder for them to partner up with universities who have a longer term horizon. Even companies like Facebooks of the world have had a harder time, let alone companies that are less than 10 years old.
It's such an interesting point because I think about Bell Labs or Xerox PARC, and I talked to Munji Bowendi not that long ago, the Nobel Prize winner in chemistry at MIT. And, so many people will tell you some story back, when they were in their 20s or 30s where they spent time, as he did, in that kind of incubator of ideas that sort of straddled the two lines of like academic inquiry and commercial.
Yeah, I will posit something here that's not some well-formed thought, but I would say that anyways, which is, it also is a function of the age of the people who are running businesses. So when you go past 40, 50 years old, you stop thinking too much about the immediate future. You start thinking long term. You start thinking of the legacy you leave behind. You start thinking about what are you going to leave behind for your kids and grandkids, because you do have kids and grandkids by that time. So you start to have a longer term perspective on life, even though you have less time left in your own life. Okay? Right now, the top business leaders in technology companies are like in their 20s and 30s, with a few in their 40s, maybe. Right. And so for them, they feel like, I still have so much time. I can do everything myself. Like, I don't need professors who will be working on this problem 20 years out. Dude, I can't even imagine 20 years out. Like, I can't, I just want to do what I can do in the next 3 years. Right. And that sense, they have a sense of urgency, which has a lot of benefits to it. But it also has its drawback that they are too focused on the short term and less focused on the long term.
Speaking of short term and long term, I feel like the mantra in venture capital is often about speed. It's about scale. And when, you talk about the stuff you invest in, which is not the Facebooks of the world, I wonder, is it tricky to manage investor expectations when you're thinking about building physical things, when you think about manufacturing? Because you have to kind of justify the time and capital that's required for a company to become profitable. And it's not an app. Give me a sense.
So venture capital is something very special to America. Other countries are trying to do more in it, but they still, have to come up to speed. And the reason venture capital works is that they're effectively people who have money, who basically say, we are focused on building, we're willing to take risks if you can create higher returns. And we're okay if you create high returns over a long period of time, because we're investing this money out of our wealth, not out of our salaries. Right. Okay. So they have a longer term perspective. And of course, if you take high risk, you should have high returns. Now, not everything fits the venture capital model. If you're going to do something over a very long period of time, but it's not going to have a very high return, it may be doing very good for the society, but it doesn't have a very high IRR return, internal rate of return associated with that, then it may not fit the venture capital model. But fortunately for us, if you're doing breakthrough technology investments that truly transform large industries, that give you effective monopolies in those segments because of the patent landscape that we used to have, and in other ways that we now have of building moats around businesses, you can actually commercialize that over the long term and create amazing businesses. Tesla was a crazy idea maybe 15, 20 years ago, but today it's one of the most, biggest companies on our stock market. And SpaceX similarly. The focus shouldn't be about the input. So a lot of people focus on software is good because software doesn't need that much capital. Hardware or deep tech is bad because it takes a lot of capital. Right. Well, if anything, the last 5 years have shown that software sometimes take even more capital than hardware.
It's true. It's true.
Like somebody just posted yesterday that I was looking at that, OpenAI and Anthropic have raised more capital each than SpaceX, right? And SpaceX is doing more revenues than OpenAI or Anthropic. So it's not that, those guys are like much bigger businesses. Right. And one could argue SpaceX is tremendously important for our country and for the future of science and, where humanity goes next, quite literally. But that said, we have to think less about the inputs, more about the outputs, which is what are the outcomes that we can expect out of this? And if the outcome is going to be new industries, new economy, new jobs, great efficiency, national security, economic advantage, globally, those things have real value associated with that. And I think that's what we should be doing. Founders, in my opinion, and especially now because, AI and some of the software tooling, as I mentioned earlier, has made more industries accessible to founders and entrepreneurs. Founders think less about the inputs. They think a lot about, they imagine a world that should exist, and then they go build it. So optimizing search engine making minor improvements on that, it can create money in the short term, but it's not really value creation for society in the long term. Okay? But improving our healthcare systems or changing transportation modes for elderly and kids and whatnot that we don't have right now, getting rid of this soccer mom idea, this would unlock tremendous potential in society, and I think we should be working towards it.
So let me ask you a few quick questions in the minutes we have left. You've kind of talked about this, and then you've also written about the sort of changing of jobs that there were in general in the past only a few engineers, scientists, researchers, doctors, and that was a kind of limitation. What is your sense of what AI means now for those professions, or might mean for them in the future?
So look, 40% of all engineers in the world that are going to graduate this year are Chinese. 30% of all engineers working in the world are Chinese. So until 5-7 years ago, I would have lamented with you and said, we don't have enough doctors. We're not producing enough mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. Even our universities are not producing enough of them, right? Like you go to, universities and everybody wants to become a computer science major or want to do business and economics. Like few people want to go into the chemistry department, the study that I did,
sure. Yep.
Right? And hence I would say we are going to fall behind in all these other sectors because we're not doing enough, put aside all the policy nonsense that we do to shoot ourselves in the foot. We just don't have enough talent deployed in these sectors to move forward. I think AI is reducing some of that, burden and making it more possible for more people to become engineers and scientists. If I can vibe code my way and become a software developer without having that, then sure, you can vibe code your way into becoming a material scientist to some extent as well. In the short term, it will be doing tasks for these types of engineers, researchers, doctors. It'll be doing tasks that I don't want to do. Right? It's tasks that I feel, I don't want to say beneath me, but it's not utilizing me efficiently. Right? So I will outsource things to other people, like people outsource things to their executive assistants or chiefs of staff or whatever. So I will outsource that same thing. Right? And in the longer term, I think the value is that they're tasks that even I cannot do. And it's a little bit like, giving me superpowers. Think of like a calculator, right? As smart as I might be, except for a few, kids that participate in competitions, if you gave me a large 7-digit number multiplied by another 7-digit number, I can't do that in my head.
Right.
But a calculator can do that. So when we could do that, it was amazing. Right? Our engineering reached next level because we could do calculations. We could do graphs and asymptotic graphs, and we could figure out at what, how does this graph change and where will this material break at what pressure and whatnot, that we didn't have to do those things in our mind. We had calculators, computers, spreadsheets, and so on, programs that could do that. Now AI will do the same thing. It will start doing things that you and I cannot do. I can design a system. I can design, for example, a structure that won't break under certain kind of pressure because I remember a few things about it. But if I have a very complex system operating, I can't do that out of my head. But AI system can design that within minutes. So I think that's, to me, it's not only for all of these fields that we talked about, making more of them available, which is in itself great value, but in giving them superpowers to do things that they previously could not do. It is physicists became a better physicist when they had a calculator available to them, and they became an even better physicist when they had a computer available to them. Now imagine with AI available, they take it to the next level.
A final question for you, just a prediction. If we were to have this conversation again in 5 years, is there something that is kind of niche now, but you feel like in 5 years, it might be mainstream when you think about the kind of stuff you're investing in and the world that, but maybe most people do not realize that things are going to change?
Oh, I think because 5 years is actually not very far away.
That's true.
I actually think that right now we are consumers of AI. We use ChatGPT. It's almost like a search engine like Google to many people. We use AI apps, various things, that could be like within your Zoom, you may have some AI app that's taking notes or summarizing the conversation and all that. We are all consumers. I think in 5 years, most of us will be producers. We'll be creating AI apps. We'll be generating. It's a little bit like, early days of YouTube. We were just downloading video from CBS or whoever posted, videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And guess what? We're the creators now.
Right.
Like the entire TikToks and whatnot is just, there's no company out there creating all the content for you to consume on a TikTok. It's like all of us are posting content. So I think AI will be the same. We'll all be creating content, creating apps that will be used by all of us all at the same time. So it will be, we go to Kayak right now or Orbitz to do travel searches. It won't be the same. We will write our own app to do the travel search with our constraints, our requirements, and search the entire web, not just these sites. But direct API. People say currently that, search engines of today were created for humans to do searches. In 5 years, machines will be doing 10 or 100 times more searches than humans. What will that search engine look like? It won't look like the search engines of Google's and whatnot that we have now. I think the same thing will apply in every which way. So if you really simplify that, it will be that we will become creators of AI versus just consumers of it.
Bilal Zuberi is the founder and managing partner of the venture capital firm Red Glass. He previously worked at Lux and General Catalyst. Bilal, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
So great talking to you.
And since Bilal mentioned the question of privacy is something that universities are working on, we're going to put a link on our website to our conversation with Danny Weitzner at MIT, who has been partnering with a consortium of financial companies on just that issue, privacy. To hear a discussion of Weitzner's work, you can head to csail.mit.edu/podcast. And if you're looking for that episode on your feed, it's from October 2024. It's called How Companies Can Rebuild Trust. We've got a lot more about CSAIL on that website, including the 2 courses that I mentioned at the top of the show. One is Deploying AI, which looks at when, where, and how to leverage AI for strategic impact and ROI. The other course is Cybersecurity for Technical Leaders. And if you enter in the discount code CSAIL15, you'll save 15% on either course. You will find both of those courses at csail.mit.edu/podcast. I'm Kara Miller. Our show is produced by Matt Purdy and Andrew Zukowski with help from Audrey Woods. Join us again next time and stay ahead of the curve.